In this presentation, we will continue on with our comprehensive problem. We will now be recording the expenses that are happening for the month. Those expenses including the payment of utilities. For more accounting information and accounting courses, visit our website at accountinginstruction.info. Payment of the phone bill, the payment of wages. So we can think of these kind of like similar to our personal expenses, things we're just going to pay at the end of the month. We're going to pay them with cash. We can imagine writing a check for them. Now, in terms of a journal entry standpoint, we could do this all with one journal entry. I could put one journal entry in there as of January 28th and record this in one. It's probably easier to see in multiple journal entries. And in practice, we would probably be writing a check or something like that, and therefore would be breaking them out. They would be in separate transactions as well. So we'll keep with that practice. Just note that from just a recording standpoint, we can do it either way. So we'll start with the utilities here. So we paid the utilities. So is cash affected? We're going to say, yeah, cash is affected. We paid it with cash. Obviously, we would be writing a check or something in real life, but that's our checking account. So we're going to say that that is our cash account. So, and note again, I'm not thinking about the debit first. I'm always going to be thinking about how's the easiest way I can build this thing. And the easiest way is typically to think of cash if it's affected first, and then that's the fastest way to move forward. So cash is a debit balance. We're going to do the opposite thing to it, which in this case is a credit to make it go down. Copying cash with a right click and copy, putting that below the date because it will be on the credit side in cell H15. Where we will say right click and paste 1, 2, 3. I'm going to indent it down now, which is probably done for you already, but this is how it is done. Home tab, alignment group, increase the indentation. Then we're going to go to the credit side, put the amount. I'm going to put a negative because it's going to be a credit, and I'm representing credits with negatives in this worksheet, negative 1300. Then we're going to debit something for that same amount. I'm going to use a nice little formula to do that, which is a negative of this number, and enter. So you could just type in 1,300. I like to say negative of that number because any formula is usually preferable to no formula. Okay, so then what's the account going to be? We paid the utilities. So if we have a trial balance, which is nice to have in any problem, and if we look through it, look for utilities, we're going to say, there it is, utilities expense. Now, as we do this, you're probably just going to start to memorize that, utilities expense, supplies, wages expense. Some of these things are probably just going to ring as an expense in your mind. But just remember that utilities is not an expense by definition. It doesn't mean it's not an expense just because it's utilities. It's an expense. It's possible for example, this insurance, we didn't put to insurance expense. We put it up here to prepaid insurance, and same with supplies. So why did we do that? It's not just like inherent in supplies or insurance for the reason we do that. It's because for insurance and supplies, we bought them before we consumed them. So if, for example, we had the utilities and we paid for a year's worth of utilities, which could happen before we used the utilities, then we put it into prepaid utilities and then have to do the accrual process. But usually the utilities is paid on a month-to-month basis, pretty close to when the actual consumption happened, and therefore we can expense it. It's important to note that distinction because there will be times when we might capitalize the utility and put it up top, and we want to know that it's not just utilities as an expense, it's the circumstance of how we're paying for it and when we consumed it. Okay, so enough of that. We're going to say the expenses all have debits. We're going to increase it by doing the same thing to it, which is another debit. So we're going to copy that with a right click and copy. Put that up top in H14, right click and paste 1, 2, 3. Now I'm going to do the rest of I'm going to do the other two here in two separate journal entries before posting them because they're going to look very similar. So we're going to say the phone is the next thing we paid. Is cash affected? Yeah, we're writing another check. Cash has a debit balance. We're going to make it go down, doing the opposite thing to it, which in this case is a credit. So I'm going to copy cash, right click in cash. We're going to skip a line. I'm going to skip another line because I want to be it on the bottom. So I'm in cell H18, where we'd right click and paste 1, 2, 3. We're going to indent that, go into the Home tab. This is done for you, most likely already. Home tab, alignment, increase indenting. Then we're going to go to the credit side. How much did we pay for the phone bill? Looks like $1,100. We will say negative 1100, enter. We'll debit something for that 1100, doing so with a little formula of negative of that number. Then what's the debit going to be? And again, we pay the phone bill monthly, so typically we can just expense that as well. That's the norm. All expenses have debit balances. They only go up in the debit direction. Notice there are exceptions, but general rule, always go up in the debit direction. So when we see an expense, in other words, we're probably going to be debiting it. So we're going to right click and copy the telephone expense. We're going to put that in cell H17, right click and paste. 1, 2, 3. So there's that one. Now the next one's going to be wages. So we paid wages. Now here, just a disclaimer here, we're not going to be processing, of course, all of payroll. We can have a whole nother course to process payroll. Payroll is going to be complicated, but note that wages is going to be a normal type of transaction. It's going to be very significant. And if you break it down to its core, kind of before we had all the rules in terms of withholdings and what we got to do in terms of payroll taxes, it's just like any other type of expense at its core. Meaning, if we had a simple term and we said, I'm going to pay you $5,000 or pay my employees $5,000 at the end of each time period, at the end of every 2 weeks, and we shook hands, then at the end of the 2-week period, if I didn't have to withhold or do anything else, then I would just credit cash and debit the wages expense. In practice, of course, we've got to withhold, Social Security, Medicare, federal income tax, and any other kind of stuff that, 401k and whatnot. So again, we'll get into all that later. This is just going to show the fact that we have the wages on there, and in essence, this is the journal entry that we'll build on if we go into a more complex transaction for wages with the withholding. So we just made an agreement. We said we're gonna pay you $5,000 or pay whoever our employees are at the end of whatever time period, which happens to be at 128 here. So we're going to pay this amount. So then we're going to record this as is cash affected. We're going to say, yeah, cash is going down. We're going to do the opposite thing to it, which is a credit. Right click and copy. We're going to put that on the bottom. So we'll put that on the bottom here. Right click and paste 1, 2, 3. Then we're going to put the credit amount, which is going to be for negative 5,000. We will debit something. I'm going to put negative of this number. And then the amount will be wages expense. So wages expense, right click and copy. We're going to put that up top in H20, right click and paste 1, 2, 3. I'm going to go ahead and indent this. Home tab, alignment, increase indenting. Now we'll go through the process of posting. So we've journalized these 3 journal entries into the general journal. We've made them. And then we're going to post them into the general ledger. So because there's 3 of them, we could get mixed up. We're not just working on the last one, so it's easy to get mixed up when we're posting. So I'm going to color them to do that. I'm going to make this a different color. So I'm going to select these items, right click on them, and I'm going to make it green. This is the one we'll do first. Right click on it, and I'm going to make it green. So when I work on stuff, I make it green typically. So I'm going to make that green. And then we could make this smaller to do this, or we can just navigate around. I'm going to freeze the panes. So to freeze the panes, we're going to go up top. We're going to go to the right just a bit. So G is flush with the side. We're up here in cell K1, where we will now freeze the panes. Go into the View tab, go into the Windows group, Frozen Panes, Freeze Panes, and Freeze the Pane. Then we see that Utilities Expense is here. Utilities Expense is way down here. So it's going to be the same order on the general ledger. So Assets, and then Liabilities in orange, then Equity, light blue. We're looking for Utilities, which is way over here. And so here it is. We're on the debit side. So here's Utilities, here's Utilities. We are in AI 15, where we will say equals and point to the 1,300 and enter. So the 0 goes up by 1,300 to 1,300. If we go back to our trial balance by clicking just to the left of the frozen panes and then going right with the arrows one time, Popping back over, we see the 3,000 here. We see we're out of balance by 3,000. We see net income went down by 3,000. Expenses going up, net income, revenue minus expense goes down. So then we've got the cash. So here's the cash. We're going to record that to the cash. Oh, I'm sorry. See, that's how we get them mixed up there. But I made it green, and that saved me. So here's the cash account that we want to record for the journal entry we are on. And we're going to go up top. Here's cash. So we'll record that to the cash. We're going to scroll back down. We're going to put that in the credit side. So P18, we're going to record this cash by saying equals, pointing to that 1,300. This is a debit. That's a credit. The 45,000 debit will go down by 1,300 credit to 43,700. If we scroll just to the left or click just to the left of the frozen panes and click right on the keyboard, we'll see that that amount is now here on cash, 43,700. Now I'm going to unblue this and I'm going to make it blue and ungreen it. And then we'll make this one green and go to this one. So to do that, we can select the entire thing, right click, and then I usually click this paint. Well, you have to click this paintbrush. And then I'm going to make it this blue. If you don't have that blue, you can go to your colors here. You can go to the standard and you can click that color. I think it's that one. The other way you can do it, if that's confusing, is you can highlight this one, and I want to use the same formatting. So I can use our paintbrush by going to the Home tab, Paintbrush, and then paint this one. Just note when you do that, it'll change the formatting too. So what you don't want to do, for example, is click this one and format all of them. Why? Because really it changed the formatting, brought this one over. So what you want to do is say, I want it to look exactly like these cells, paintbrush, and those cells. Okay. Okay, so now we'll do this one. I'm going to highlight these, right click and make it green because that's what we're working on now. We're going to post the telephone expense. So here's telephone expense down here, last one. So we got to go all the way. I'm just going to hold down the arrow key until I get to the end because it's the last. So here's the telephone. Here's telephone, debit side of the telephone. So we're in AM15 where we will say equals, point to that 1,100 and enter. The 0 goes up by 1,100 to 1,100. We can see that this will also be on the trial balance by clicking just to the left of the frozen panes and scrolling right with the arrows. And there it is. There's the 1,100, out of balance by 1,100. Net income goes down by 1,100. Then we need to go to the cash side of it. So here's cash. Here's cash up top. First account. It's going to be the first account on the GL as well. So we're here in O19. We're on the credit side. We're in P19. So cash, credit side, P19. Where we will say equals and point to that 1,100. The 43,700 going down by 1,100 to 42,600. That then can be found on the trial balance. If we click just to the left of the frozen panes, go right, there's the 42,600 here. Okay, so now we're going to do the last one. So I'm going to highlight this green one and we're done with that. I'm going to right click. I'm just going to make it blue, selecting the paintbrush. I'm just going to click this blue this time. And again, you could just format paint it again if you would like, either way. And I'm not going to make this one green. I don't need to because now it's just the last one. We're working on the last one. That's what we normally do. So here's wages expense. Here's wages expense. It's our second income statement account. Same order on the general ledger. So we've got the assets, we got the liabilities, we got equity, we've got income and expenses. Wages. We're up top in wages in the debit side, AI9. Within AI9, we're going to say equals and point to that 5,000, bringing the 0 up by 5,000 to 5,000. That 5,000 also found on the trial balance. If we go right to the left of the frozen panes and click right, we'll see there's the 5,000. We can see we're out of balance by 5,000. We can see that net income goes down by 5,000, revenue minus expenses. Remember that this is a income, not a loss. This is a credit to us. Excel sees it as a negative. we see it as a credit as well. Then the cash, last piece, cash. Here's cash up top. Same order on the GLs, our first account. We're going to be here in the credit side. We're in cell P20. Within P20, we will say equals. Point to that 5,000. The 42,600 debit will go down by the 5,000 credit to 43,600. Then we're going to go back to our trial balance by just going to the left of the frozen panes, clicking right one time, and there we have it, the 37,000. So if we see what happened here, of course, our expenses are now here now. So we've increased expenses, and net income is revenue credits minus the debits. So Excel sees this as a negative number, but we see it also as a credit. Credits are good on the income statement. Credit minus the debit gives us the 19,600 of net income. So again, note if it's formatted this way, how easy it is for us to figure something out. We can say, okay, here's what the assets are, 133,600. Who has claim to those assets? The third parties and equity would equal the same, 133,600. So these assets of 133,600 are claimed if we were to go out of business by third parties of 14,000, and then the rest of it is claimed by the owners. Now we know these owners claim 40, 50, and 10 respectively, and we know that we have this net income of 19,600, which we have to allocate to these three in accordance with their profit sharing, which we'll do at the end of the time period. So that's who has claim to these assets. For more accounting information and accounting courses, visit our website at accountinginstruction.info.